So I think I'll start for the people who are online and the people who are seated. And, I'm going to try to frame this. Unfortunately, the lighting in this room is
Yes, it's very bad.
awful. So I hope I remember enough that if the lighting is bad, I can do it that way.
Per classroom.
It's just really,
It's a social house, it's not a classroom.
right, it was never made to be a classroom, so that's one of the goodies about it.
Here, excuse me, here is where it says in this book.
But they'll be here soon.
All right, so I think I'll try to start. What I'm gonna try to do today, those of you who have, I've usually come 2-3 times a year. This is my 3rd time this year. One of the things I'm interested in is always, the structure of the, particular, parsha. I'm interested in the differences in the translations from one source to another. And particularly, I think I mentioned in the past, I've been looking at the Everett Fox and at the Robert Alter as the 2 most recent modern interpretations and translations. So I brought my own of the Fox today because there's more than what I wanted to put out for you. And I normally use an electronic version of the Alter. So I got the libraries and the print is really much smaller than using it electronically. So what I want to start with today is the book Devarim, Deuteronomy itself, and how it's laid out and what it's about. Then I thought we're going to, in Parshat Devarim, if we get past the first 2 or 3 verses, I'll be very surprised. And the reason is the following. We're going to look at those things. And those of you who know the big website Sefaria, they have a huge collection of Midrash Rabbah. And this week they put up Devarim Rabbah, finally this collection of Midrashim Deuteronomy. And on chapter 1, there were like 10 or 12. I picked 2 for us. And they tie in very nicely with the issue of what the words mean, what this is all about. So if those of you who studied Bible a lot over the years know that Deuteronomy, called Devarim in Hebrew, often called Mishnah Torah, the second Torah, has 2 big things to it. First, it's a huge repetition of all the events that have happened in the first 4 books, particularly all of those that have to do with the wandering in the desert and the changing of Bnei Yisrael from slaves to free men and free people, particularly free men though. The other piece of it is that it's Moses's last words. And unlike in the previous parts of the Bible, when Moses very seldom spoke directly. He spoke as a vehicle for God. The words were, and we know Moses from the book of Exodus as a man slow of speech and with a thick tongue and unable to utter a lot. And we know that in Exodus, Aaron speaks for him. And so we suddenly are in a section of the Bible where Moses himself is giving the speeches. And in many sense, they're like the farewell addresses, but there are 3 or 4 very long farewell addresses. Alter points out that in the book of Deuteronomy is the longest sentence in the Bible. That's 1 pasuk. And there's a beautiful rhythm to them. We also find that a number of the stories that are that we've read before come back and are retold. And we're going to look at 2 in particular if we have time. They're on the bottom of the sheet. The one from Parshat Yitro and the one from Shalach that are in chapter 1, and you read them, say, wait a minute, I didn't remember them that way. And if you're the kind of kid who, when you went to Hebrew school and they taught this, you went and looked back in the front and you said, why are these different? And I already learned these, but they didn't learn them quite this way. So one of the questions that's asked is, why is all this the way it is? And Fox has quite a discussion about it, and also Alter does. So I want to start with what Alter has, and if somebody wants to read it out to me, it's on the top of the sheet on the name of it itself as Deuteronomy or Devarim. Somebody want to read the first thing I provided? Okay, thanks.
The words, the prevalent Hebrew title for Deuteronomy, following the convention of using the first significant word in the text as title, is Devarim, words. The title Deuteronomy, which is the Greek equivalent of an alternate ancient Hebrew name for the book, means second law or repetition of the law, and is based on the Hebrew phrase in 1718, Mishnah HaTorah Hazot, a copy or repetition of this teaching or law Torah. Deuteronomy is in fact a recapitulation of the law and narrative of the 3 preceding books, as well as in certain important respects, a revision of them. The Greek title is perfectly apt, but Devarim is a title has the advantage of highlighting the preeminently rhetorical character of this book, which is structured as a series of long speeches delivered by Moses to Israel, which also incorporates, as the opening chapter illustrates, prominent elements of dialogue, words of speech framed by words of oratory. More than any other biblical text, it is a book of words, as the Hebrew title suggests.
So I thought that Alter's understanding of Devarim and also of its meaning, the Greek word for it, as meaning Mishnah Torah Hazot, that these are as meaning a second law because everything is restated, is a very interesting way to look at it. Before we move on, for those of you who know Hebrew, when you think of the word davar, what translations do you think of it in English?
Thing.
Also, davar is used as thing,
Sayings.
sayings, words.
Commandments.
Words, so commandments, because the 10 commandments are called Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 sayings or the 10 words. So, and that's very important as we're going to look at this here.
I always like to point out the similarity between Devarim and Midbar.
Yes, Devarim and the word Midbar have the same shorish to them. There's also, which we're going to look at, there's a very popular insect that is the same shorish. Devora. The bees, that's the same word, Devarim. So, and we're going to see that there are a number of midrashim that talk about how wordy this is, that like it buzzes with so many words, like a Devora, like you know, onomatopoeia. Yes, that it's the same sort of section. So, and we're going to look at, there's a number of, we'll look at some midrashim about it in just a minute. I wanted to tell you what Fox thinks about it, and I brought some of it for you, and then we'll look at a little more. So, Fox tries to understand where this comes from, and he's much more interested in the history of how the Bible was put together. And he feels that we know that in that era, there are documents in the ancient Near East that in some ways this mirrors and changes. We've noticed, you probably noticed, as you've been studying the different parts of the Torah, that we know that there were certain things that were common in Babylonia, that were common in Assyria, that were common in Egypt. However, when whoever compiled the Torah, whether it's given by God at Mount Sinai or inspired by what happened at Mount Sinai and put together by people, I'm not going to get into that. Everybody has their own belief system about how much you accept Torah Sinai as being God given or God inspired. It's clear that however this got down in writing was influenced by the people among whom these ancient Israelites lived. And Fox notes that in that era, there were many times when the rulers gave oratories or speeches, farewell addresses that were then affirmed by the people and often were signed like treaties. He sees the speeches in Deuteronomy as something similarly being done, except that it's not to affirm what the ruler is saying as Moses as the leader. Instead, it's to affirm the children of Israel's belief in God, that when they hear these, this is, if they believe this, then they will follow God's commandments and they will follow his laws and his statutes and his ways. So the whole pattern, which you find in other places where people are, people seal this, is taken and turned on its head because we don't believe in the ancient idols and we don't believe in that kind of affirmation.
Yeah, this is what you're referring to is the ancient Near Eastern suzerain treaty,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Which is a covenant. These were covenants, they were political treaties, typically between a more powerful leader or state, and a lesser power. And there were a number of things like a preamble and a historical prologue, right? And then stipulations, et cetera, that Deuteronomy is based on structurally. So that you see precisely, and this is, Jonathan Sachs does a thing on this, exactly that it's, at the beginning of Deuteronomy and Devarim, you have the preamble, which introduces who's speaking, the leader, and so on. And then, you get into the historical prologue. Is that?
Yes.
So it's a covenant. The whole book of Deuteronomy.
Yeah, and Fox feels it's several of these speeches that we then affirm as our belief in God. Go ahead.
So we're talking about how in the ancient Near East, how the Jewish people and our beliefs were influenced by those surrounding us. So obviously it makes us think how much is our Jewish belief today in America influenced by what surrounds us. And then I was reminded last night as I'm walking down our street and these black hat guys with payas and dressed in medieval garb, basically 18th and 19th century garb, that they're trying to stop. They don't want to see the influence. They're trying to back it up. And then, so there's nothing new under the sun.
Yes, but I think the difference is here that instead of us being influenced and doing the same thing, the ancient peoples were familiar with these forms, but they transformed the forms into Jewish practice instead of being influenced the other way to take their practices and influencing our practice. There were certain forms of poetry. But don't forget, most people in that era are illiterate. Everybody learns by hearing. One of the reasons there's so much poetry is it's easier to remember poetry. The reason that so much of this is sent to song and the reason we chant it to this day is it's easier to remember something if it's sung. So the absolute opposite thing is happening here,
Right.
where the forms of that era that people would be familiar with are being transformed for our purposes rather than our purposes being transformed for them.
And one of the big keys in understanding this is back then, all of the laws from the surrounding civilizations came from kings, powerful kings,
Exactly.
right? Whereas our law comes from God. So, and just think about all the ramifications of that,
Right.
in terms of, a whole political setup and human rights and so forth.
Right. So what I wanted to mention before we get in a little farther is Fox sees the book of Deuteronomy in 5 parts compared to how other people see them. So he first sees that chapters 1 through 4 are going to be an historical overview with Moshe as narrator. We're going to look at this carefully in chapter 1. The people are on one side of the river, are going to go into the land. Moses stands in this place and he recapitulates the journey and everything that happens. And we're going to look at those in particular. And so he re-narrates the wilderness journey in chapters 1 to 3, which is Parshat Devarim which is the parsha for this week. And we'll hear the differences in it. And then he'll give a huge exhortation at that point. Then the second part of Devarim is going to be Moshe as pleader, looking back at the revelation at Sinai. And then the middle of the book of Devarim, which is going to be Moses as lawgiver, is chapters 12 through 28, where there's a repetition of the 10 Commandments and all the blessings and curses. Then Moshe as pleader will come again, looking ahead to exile and return. And then part 5 is going to be the passing of the mantle to Joshua, and Moses blessing the tribes and his end. Because if you recall, when we finish Numbers, we all know that Moses does not come into the promised land, but Moses's death is at the end of Devarim, after the whole recapitulation, not before that. So it's an interesting way to look at it. You wanted to?
I was just wondering, is there anything said about where was the need and why was the need to create a 5th book, which is more or less, as the name applies, Mishneh Torah, a repetition of all the previous 4 ones? One could be, of course, emphasis of what's been said before, but
This Fox has a theory on it. And I brought this, the light here is very poor, but what he thinks is, later in the Torah, I think it's in Ketuvim, we have where King Hosea, I think it's Josiah, discovers that they haven't known the law. And they find an old book of the law. And they're all very upset, and he exhorts the people to learn the law again. Well, the Fox's theory is that's Devarim that was found. And I couldn't find, and he quotes a scholar named Weinfeld. He quotes Jeffrey Tigay, whose wife grew up in Buffalo, which I should need to know. He's been at Penn. Their theory is that's the reason that whoever decided how many books should be the 5 books, that Deuteronomy becomes the 5th book, that this is the book that was found
I said,
at that time, at which recapitulated a lot of this material, and then they found the rest of it.
There's
It's a lovely story. And I think it's an interesting way to explain why it's there.
There's another reason for having Deuteronomy. There's something like 70 or 74 mitzvot that don't appear earlier.
Right, so there's that.
So we need those.
Right, so that becomes a question of it also, Bernard.
Even though there's repetition, some of it is a little updating and clarifying our rules about slaves, and I can't remember others, but it's updated while it's repeating.
Yes, exactly. It's either updating it, changing it a little bit. And then, of course, that one of the other things both Fox and Alter say, what they like about this is what is giving the rabbinical, all the rabbis and the commentators since then, permission to interpret. Because, and to change a little bit, because the same things are here with a little interpretation, a little bit of difference. You can compare them to the earlier versions, and that our whole tradition of interpretation and of commentary and of midrashim really comes because of the book Devarim.
Yeah, if I remember this correctly, one of the things they found, Josiah found, was the rules for the holiday of Pesach. They didn't celebrate Pesach. From
Correctly, they had forgotten it. Yes, that's one of the things in the legends about that.
And also along with that, the recapitulation is necessary because the first revelation at Sinai is heard by a generation that's no longer alive.
Yes,
Okay,
so that's
it's important for Moses, to repeat it, to state it to the people now at the edge of Canaan.
so that's one of the rationales for that the commentators give for the repetition, that these are the children and the grandchildren of the people who originally went out from Egypt, and they need to hear it again before they're going to go into the land. Yes.
Well, it resonates with me, like what you said pointed out about how this is a slight variation of repetition of the important things in the Torah leading up to now. And that it allows for this conversation and interpretation. And here we are, I don't know, 3,000 years later, we're still able to discuss it because of the brilliance of the creativity of the authors who set the setting for us to.
Yeah, I think it's really, it's a wonderful inspiration to think about that this is how this is looked at. So let's look at one other thing that I brought you
Can
from
I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
If this is structured according to a kind of document that the surrounding people were familiar with, how did the Jews learn about it?
Well,
How
so
did the Jews
one
learn
of the-
about the structure?
So one of the things you have to realize is that there was no physical barrier between the ancient Hebrews and the people among whom they lived. And the same way that the people among whom they lived knew about us, we knew about them. You have all these stories, especially in the Genesis stories, where the attraction of idol worship is so strong. You have the story of Rachel, who brings the Trifim with her in when she the little household idols with her when she goes to meet Yitzchak, so that nobody's living in a vacuum. Even though everyone is trying to keep particularly one of the reasons for all these exhortations around the the children of Israel is that they're not alone. When your flocks are out, you can run into a Moabite shepherd. You can pass a shrine of another people on the road. And so it's very easy to be influenced by that. If you go to a city and you trade, and we know that they traded, you'll hear a proclamation in the square that's in a format from another people. And we know that, and if you read the old stela that are found in archaeology, you see the influence of the different writings on one another. We know that the source of written Hebrew and the source of the Phoenicians writing is from a similar place. So that's, I think, very important. Just the same way today, it is very easy to be influenced by the customs of the people around us. We see in, I'm not going to use the Hanukkah example because it's so famous, but we see suddenly that Tu B'Shvat, one of the most incidental holidays in the Jewish calendar, because of the awareness of the environment and of climate change and the things that are happening in the general society, has been moved up in emphasis from where you know, if you even noticed that it happened when you were a child, it was because somebody told you to plant a tree. It was, you know, it was really a very inconsequential holiday as far as we were concerned. Look at Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer, the bonfire holiday. Because one of the things my kids always used to kid about, that in Israel, that any holiday that you can make a fire becomes a popular holiday, because it's a Lag BaOmer, which really in the diaspora has very little ability to be celebrated, is the barbecue holiday. So there's a whole lot of things that change based on the environment and what is more popular at one time than another. Let's look at what I brought you that Fox particularly says about its I think most of this we talked about, but let's see if there's anything here. If somebody would read out what I brought you from the historical overview from Fox. Go ahead.
In this introductory section, which some scholars have viewed as a later addition to the core of the book, Moshe reviews the journey of the Israelites from Mount Sinai into the Negev, and from there up east of the Dead Sea to a spot opposite Jericho. Two things make this more than a mere itinerary. First, Moshe confines himself to the most important moments, choosing of leaders, the sending of the spies with all its disastrous consequences, the encounters with various nations, and the provisions made for the soon-to-occur conquest. Second, the text characterizes itself not as a narrative per se, but as an explanation of the instruction. In other words, history is made to function as lesson here, that the account ends with Beit Peor, Baal Peor, or in 329 is surely not accidental. As 4:3 reminds us, this was the site of Israel's great apostasy. The final negative act by a wayward generation that was not to live to enter the land of Israel. By means of this introduction, the new generation is warned about the failings of the old and begins to be prepared for entering and taking possession of the land promised to their ancestors.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is now we're gonna look at Deuteronomy 1 through 11. And I've got at the top here a very condensed version. If somebody wants to read it out from the 8th Chaim, so everybody can follow the same reading, and then we'll talk about it. So who wants to, if someone would read out 1 through 11 for us.
These are the words that Moses addressed to all Israel on the other side of the Jordan, through the wilderness in the Arba near Huf, between Paran and Tophel, Laban, Hazeroth, and Dizahab. It is 11 days from Horeb to Kadesh Barnea by the Mount Seir route. In the 40th year, on the first day of the 11th month, that Moses addressed the Israelites in accordance with the instruction that God had given him for them after he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, the king of Og of Bashan, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and Adrai. These are the words, because there are words of reproof, and he is enumerating here all the places where they provoked God to anger. Therefore, he suppresses all mention of the matters in which they sinned.
So I think we were gonna go to 11. Oh, you read off this. I wanted
The sheet.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
right. I wanted to do it from here because
Start
okay,
with
so that was the first 5. So if somebody can take us through 11.
on the other side of the Jordan, the land of Moab.
Page are you on? Speak louder, please. 982.
Verse 5.
Okay,
From number 4 now. Can start from number 4. Michael finished the three. You can start from the four.
Line 4.
Yeah.
After he had defeated Sihon, king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Heshbon, and King Og of Bashan, who dwelt at Ashtaroth and Adrai. On the other side of the Jordan in the land of Moab, Moses undertook to expound this teaching. He said, "The Lord our God spoke to us at Horeb, saying, 'You have stayed long enough at this mountain. Start out and make your way to the hill country of the Amorites, and to all their neighbors in their Arba, the hill country, the Shephelah, the Negev, sea coast, the land of the Canaanites, and the Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. See, I place the land at your disposal. Go, take possession of the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to assign to them and to their heirs after them. Thereupon I said to you, I cannot bear the burden of you by myself. The Lord your God has multiplied you until you are today as numerous as the stars in the sky. May the Lord, the God of your fathers, increase your numbers 1,000-fold and bless you as he has promised you. How can I bear unaided the trouble?"
We're gonna stop it. That's where we're gonna stop. So that's if you listen to it in terms of an opening, just reading it and not starting to study it, well, how do you feel? What do you feel like you're listening to?
You can't really understand where these places are.
Okay, so there's all these strange places. What else is the feeling of it?
What I got, I read this two different, Chumash. It mentions in the beginning, all Israel, which I kind of say is kind of impossible. It was 601,000 at the time of the Jordan. How would he speak to 600,000 people once?
Right, so is when it says here, El Kol Yisrael, so as everybody gathered there. So one of the things, if you think of the opening, physically try to imagine where is Moses and where are all these people?
They're on the east bank.
They're on the east, they must be in a valley of subtype, right? Because the Midrash says that there were 650,000 at Sinai. So this is not at Sinai, this is after Sinai. So it's a minimum, the 600,000 for Sinai,
601,000.
plus whoever else has been born as they've been wandering,
The last census, it's still 600,000.
still 600,000.
Yeah, so 600,000 in a valley.
600,000
Imagine-
fighting men.
Right, so there's 600,000 men plus their families, we believe, and their children, because there's references in here, as we'll read this through the children. So again, the physical setup of hearing the opening of the book of Deuteronomy it's hard to visualize.
This is not the first or only place where it says he spoke to everybody.
Right,
It's not we knew it's never been possible.
I mean, it could be just the leaders of the tribes. That's what I thought, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
so that's one of the
talks
things.
to groups.
Yeah.
To heads of groups.
So again, we don't know, and it's interesting that in the Midrashim and in the commentaries, I didn't see any commentaries that particularly address the issue of these people. There's a lot of commentaries on all the places that are mentioned. Where are these places? Can they find them on ancient maps? Some of the places you can find. A lot of these places, nobody's been able to find in any ancient maps or in any archaeology. So that's one of the questions. Where are all these places?
Yeah,
But if you
especially,
find some, that indicates that the others are probably true. And today, I mean, this week they discovered what the moat that separates, what was it, Jerusalem?
Right.
There's
so-
some discovery this
Right,
week
this-
showing
this-
that, hey, the Bible is not making up the names of these places.
Right, but so again,
And the
this is,
facts,
this is a set. Let me see, go ahead.
I just, since you've read much of the commentary, I wonder if there is mention of this large group of Israelites all together in a valley are they looking over their shoulder? Because they're surrounded, I think, by unfriendly peoples and are they nervous?
Well, so one of the points here is that they haven't yet gone across. And this is to prepare them to go across into the land. And in the chapter, or the part we're not going to look at today, it's mentioned the places that you cannot take the land from. The land that was given to Esau, you can't take because that was promised to Esau. The land that was given to Lot, you can't take because that was promised to Lot. That there are particular places you can't conquer because in the book of Genesis, those places were given away. You're not to take those. And again, there's no sense of danger. There's a big sense of listening. But the commentators in particular are very concerned about these are the words. So let's look at Rashi, because what Rashi says about this is noted by many people as the way to understand Elah HaDvarim. If somebody would like to read out to me what Rashi says on chapter 1, the first 5 verses. Linda, go ahead.
Elah HaDvarim, these are the words, because these are words of reproof, and he is enumerating here all the places where they provoked God to anger. Therefore, he suppresses all mention of the matters in which they sinned and refers to them only by a mere allusion contained in the names of these places out of regard for Israel, Sifrei Dvarim, Onkelos and Targum, Jonathan, El Kol Yisrael, the words which he spake to all Israel. If he had repressed only some of them, those who were there in the street, reproved. Sorry.
So this is Rashi's explanation of all the places. And he sees Elu HaDvarim, these are the words of reproof that God spoke regarding everything that happened in these places rather than reviewing everything that was bad.
And one of these words at the end of verse 1, Mizahah, the commentators say that they have no idea where that is.
Right.
But it has to do with gold. Zahav is gold, right?
Yes.
So they infer that this is referring to the sin of the golden calf.
Correct,
And
but
they
it,
make a whole big midrash out of this.
yes, but it's interesting. I picked the Rashis on this. If you want, I didn't bring my whole, there's a version of the Bible, the Mitsuda Rashi, where you can read all the Rashis are written out in Hebrew script with, I didn't bring it, it was too heavy to bring also, with the translation next to it. So if you have trouble reading Rashi and you want to read all of them, it's 5 volumes. There's one for each book of the Torah. And that's where I found this one. There were several other ones that were interesting, but I thought we'll stick with one as an example. So then I also found the Ramban, that's Rabbi Moshe Nachmanides, his understanding of the Elah Dvarim. So if somebody wants to look at that one. Okay.
These are the words which Moses spoke unto all Israel, to the commandments which he will mention in the entire book, beginning with the 10 commandments in the section, as scripture stated. Moses began explaining this law, saying, clearly indicating that he is speaking of the law, which begins with the 10 commandments in the next section of the Hanan. And in that case, we must say that in the following verse, the eternal our God spoke unto us. An introductory expression of saying is omitted.
Okay, so so the Nachmanides, the Ramban, says Elah HaDvarim is a reference to these are going to be the 10 commands we talked about when we started. that the root davar is also aseret hadibrot. So that this whole thing is unlike saying, Rashi thinks this is referring to a rebuke to all the places that were sinned, where the people of Israel sinned. The Rambam says, no, this is a reference to the fact that this is going to be the section where all the laws, the 10 commandments, are going to be discussed. And so that's his understanding of why it starts Elu Devarim, which I thought is a very interesting other way to understand. Then I found, I'm going to skip to the Midrashim. I found a great Midrash that is from Midrash Rabbah that considering our discussion about what everything means, I thought would be a one for good for us to discuss. And it's fairly long, but let's read it out and then we'll talk about it. If somebody wants to do the Midrash.
Page 3.
Yes, starts at the bottom. Can I get somebody that wants to read for me? Linda, go ahead.
Okay. These are the words, halacha. Is it permissible for a person of Israel to write a Torah scroll in any language? This is what the sages taught. The difference between Torah scrolls and phylacteries and mezuzot is only that Torah scrolls may be written in any language. Rabban Gamliel says, even Torah scrolls, the sages permitted to be written only in Greek. What is the source for Rabban Gamliel, who says that it is permitted to write a Torah scroll in Greek? This is what our rabbis learned. Bar Kapara said, it is written, may God expand Yefet and may he dwell in the tents of Shem. Let the words of Shem be stated in the language of Yefet. That is why they permitted them to write it in Greek.
More to it.
Yeah, on the back, the next beat. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, see the language of the Torah, how dear it is that it cures the tongue. From where is it derived? As it is written, a healing tongue is a tree of life. And a tree of life is nothing but Torah, as it is stated. It is a tree of life for those who grasp it. The language of the Torah unencumbers the tongue. Know that in the future, the Holy One, blessed be he, will take up excellent trees from the Garden of Eden. What is their excellence? It is that they cure the tongue as it is stated. Along the stream, upon its banks, on this side and on that side, will grow every food tree. Ezekiel 47:12. From where is it derived that it is a cure for the tongue? As it is stated, its fruit will be for food and its leaf for Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi one said, it is a medicine, and one said, anyone who is mute and tastes of it, his tongue will be cured, and it will be immediately articulate matters of Torah. And it will immediately articulate matters of Torah. As so it is written, on this side and on that side, and on this side and on that side, is nothing other than Torah as it is stated. Tablets were inscribed on both sides. From this side and from that side, they were inscribed. Rabbi Levi said, why should we learn from elsewhere? Let us learn from its own place, as Moses, before he was privileged to receive the Torah, it is written in his regard, I am not a man of words. When he was privileged to receive the Torah, his tongue was cured and he began speaking words. From where is it derived? From what we read in this context. These are the words that Moses spoke.
So I found that a tremendously interesting midrash those of you, I don't know how many of you get the material from the kosher food pantry. But her email last night was all about the fact that Moses delivered the Torah in 70 different languages. And I thought, well, she just expanded on the Midrash from Midrash Rabbah that I had found. So what do you think about this discussion that these are the words that the Torah means that the Torah can be written in any
When
language?
you hear the words healing tongue, I think of it in terms of a practical day-to-day application and how the tongue can be used to hurt people or to be healing, to speak words of empathy and support or to cut them down. That's what stands out to me.
Yes, go ahead, Sheila.
But what's very confusing is, okay, they permitted them to write it in Greek. But they're not really specifying that they can write it in any other language. And they didn't some in Alexandria, they wrote it in Greek.
Right, the Septuagint.
Septuagint, yeah.
Right.
But then I guess the rabbis decided not to. Because we don't have any other version. I
We
mean,
don't
if
have, we don't
someone-
have it in a scroll version, but we certainly have translations. We have the Vulgate into Latin. We
Yeah,
have-
but we don't have-
translates into English. We have it in French. We have it in German. We have it in all.
But not as a scroll. A scroll is what they really, I mean, that is what they use then. So,
Here,
Ivan,
I think that it has to do with the fact that,
louder, please.
I think it has to do with the fact that the Jews are become a people dispersed. There's a diaspora, okay, but it doesn't matter. You can still remain a Jew because it's as long as you have the words, right? And this is what has kept the Jewish people alive. And so wherever they go, if they're in Greece or they're in Spain or wherever they are, they can continue to survive because the law was given, by God, not by any human being, and in the desert, in between civilizations.
Linda?
That being said, not everybody understands Hebrew. Therefore, wherever people were, as long as one person knew and understood the Hebrew, it could be translated into that language so that everyone who spoke that language would understand the context.
Because we know that there's a lot of stuff that was in Aramaic. It's a very interesting midrash which I think Elliot's point that it's the issue of the tongue and that people who understand the Torah, it allows them to speak and that's tying it to our Parsha, the Elu Devarim, that Moses was able to speak these things because of knowing of what it did, and also the issue of understanding and that there can be different translations, and they use as the proof text that they permitted the Septuagint to be a scroll in Greek for that people. I don't want to go farther into it. We could spend all our time just on that particular midrash, but I thought when I looked at the midrashim that you can now get online, that one really jumped out because of the issue. We're looking here at all these different versions of understanding it.
Yes, there's a very, very powerful experience recently at Chautauqua, and Ivan was there. And right in the center of the campus, they have the 10 Commandments written with Moses standing there. And that's a place where people of many different faiths meet, and yet our words there. Very, very moving.
So I want to look at one more before we have to adjourn, and that is the second one, which is about the bees, which is the last one that I put on here. That again comes from this is listed as a devar acher, as another matter on understanding Elu HaDevarim. So if somebody else, Nina, want to take that one?
Another matter. These are the words, HaDevarim. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman said, the Holy One, blessed be he, said, my children were led in the world like bees, HaDevarim, by the righteous and by prophets. Another matter. These are the words, HaDevarim, just as the bee, HaDevorah, Its honey is sweet and its sting is bitter. So are matters of Torah. Anyone who violates them receives a punishment, as it is stated. The adulterer and the adulteress shall be put to death. Leviticus 20:10. Its desecrators shall be put to death. Exodus 31:14. But anyone who fulfills them merits life, as it is stated, so that your days will be extended. Another matter, these are the words, Hadavarim, just as the bee, Hadavorah, its honey goes to its owner and its sting to others. So are matters of Torah. They are an elixir of life for Israel and a lethal drug for the idolaters. Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Shimon said in the name of Rabbi Levi, just as the bee, everything that it amasses for its owner. So too, all the mitzvot and good deeds that Israel amasses, they amass for their Father in heaven.
So I thought that's really a lovely midrash on the play on the word davar, devorah, devarim, and what it's all about. So I thought that I know we have to be in by 10 o'clock, so I thought that one, in terms of looking at the portion, really gives us another sense of it, that it's sweetness for us and it can be sting for idolaters. I put at the bottom for you to, if you want to compare, you can look at verses 15 through 17 about the comparing it to Parshat Yitro. It's a restatement of how Moses appointed the judges and leaders. And it makes it sound like Moses and the people thought of it, not that this whole business about Yitro, his father-in-law, coming and seeing how overworked he was. That's all out of there. It's all that they did it themselves. Also on the one about the 22 through 30 are a restatement of sending the spies out into the land. And there's much more about them being giants, but a lot of the again, the idea that they had to be forced to do it, it's like, oh, they needed to go out, we were willing to do it. And the most of the credit is given to Caleb ben Nun rather than to Joshua. Joshua comes in at the end of this section. So what I wanted to do, and I'm going to summarize where we were, is to understand why the book of Deuteronomy is called Devarim, why sometimes it's called the second Torah, our understanding of why there's all this restatement, the supposition by some that this was the book that was found, that's mentioned later in the writings, when the king Josiah found this, and that was the book that made them realize that they had strayed from their ways, and that it's a restatement of so much, and it's for the rabbis and the commentators, the fact that it's a restatement is by many is felt as the source of the permission of all our since then through the generations for us to interpret. Because if this interpreted what was earlier, then we have the right to interpret as well. So with that in mind, I wish you a Shabbat Shalom and enjoy listening to it.